most importantly, if you haven't done so already, please silence your cell phones or turn them off at this time.
Okay, you check this mic off.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Commander Edward Singh, and it's my distinct honor and pleasure to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for today's event as we celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today, we are incredibly honored to have our special guest, Mr. Darius Gordine, Vice Commandant, Admiral and Mrs. Charles Michelle, Vice Admiral Stokes, and Vice Admiral Ray. Welcome. We're also fortunate to have the Anacostia High School Choir with us today. They will perform 2 selections throughout today's program under the direction of Dr. Barry Moulton. I request that you all please join me in giving them a round of applause in advance. As you look around the room, it's pretty obvious a lot of work went into making this program a success, this day a success. The panels to my left and to my right contain quotes from Dr. King. These quotes illustrate the profound principles Dr. King stood for. These quotes are engraved on the MLK Memorial located in West Potomac Park next to the National Mall. On the screen behind me is the statue that forms the centerpiece of this memorial. Our keynote speaker will help us better understand the history and the meaning of the memorial. In addition, some of our co-workers will come forward and share their personal stories as to how these principles that Dr. King stood for and his legacy have impacted their lives. For those of you who may not know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most profound members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, founded December 4th, 1906 at Cornell University. It's my honor to stand before you as your MC, but also to stand before you as a man of Alpha myself. Are there any other members of Alpha Phi Alpha present this morning? If so, please stand. Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be from my uncomfortable soul. In the fell cuts of circumstance, I have not wished nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath, the tears glooms but the hearts in the shade. And yet the minutes of the years find shall find me unafraid. It matters now how straight the gate, I charge with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Invictus is just one of many poems that was adopted by Alpha Phi Alpha. But to the men of Alpha, our poems have significant meaning. Our poems express wisdom to replace experience, guidance when direction is lost, confidence in the face of adversity, strength in moments of weakness, humility when pride is abundant, and illustrate love for all mankind. Our poems represent what Alpha men stand for and cherish as a way of life. Thanks again to all for joining us. Request you please stand for an invocation by Ms. Eugene McKeever.
Let us all bow our heads. Our Father and our God, we honor you today as creator, controller, and conqueror of all things. We thank you for this day, for this is the day that you have made, and we shall rejoice and continue to be glad in it. We gather today to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We honor his life that was dedicated to the fight for social justice and racial equality for all people. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for his life and the work he accomplished by proclaiming to this nation and everyone on earth that we cannot judge one by the color of their skin, but only by the content of their character. As we go forth in this service, Heavenly Father, we ask that your spirit will move from heart to heart, to breast, Continue to shower us with your blessings, and we will be ever so careful to give your name the glory, all the honor, and all the praise that is solely due unto you. It is in the name of the name that is above all names we do pray. Let us all say, Amen. Amen. Please be seated.
Out of the darkness, out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. 57 years separate my paternal grandfather's birth and slavery. Born December 31st, 1922, into a life of sharecropping. My grandfather would be disenrolled in the 3rd grade so that he could help his family farm their land. He could not read or write, but he would teach himself to read the Bible. My father was born in Anniston, Alabama, a city that would become famous because of the mob's attacks on the Freedom Riders' bus in 1961. My dad was 9.5 years old. Alabama, a state in which former governors would state publicly their support for segregation and Jim Crow policies. If you remember, Governor Wallace stated in his 1963 inaugural address, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. My dad did not talk much about segregation in his experiences, but he did share with my brothers and I one story. He was between the ages of 8 and 10, and he asked my mother, while they were grocery shopping, if he could go get water. My grandmother said yes. When he returned, my dad, amused, said, "Mom, that water tastes the same." Horrified, my grandmother, with my dad and his siblings in tow, ran out of the store, leaving her grocery cart where it was. I can only imagine, because my dad did describe, the feelings that my grandparents had that night, waiting to see if there would be any repercussions for my father's antics. My dad would turn and play basketball for his local high school. In fact, integrating the all-white basketball team in Anniston. He would earn an athletic scholarship to Alabama A&M University, and upon his completion of mechanical engineering studies, he would obtain an internship with the Corps of Engineers. It was there that Dad was selected to be a member of the design team on a wheelchair lift for former Governor George Wallace. And here it is. If you remember, in 1972, George Wallace, there was an assassination attempt here in Laurel, Maryland, and he was paralyzed as a result. And here it is, the sheer irony, that my dad, who, in his formative years, had to sit in separate but unequal schools and sit in colors-only sections in public venues, is working on the wheelchair lift for this former segregationist. And here I am, a second-generation college graduate, the first attorney on my paternal family side of the family, and a GS-15 here at headquarters. I am the vision that my grandfather hoped for so many years ago when society told him that he could not. My name is Adria Tippins, and I work in the Office of General Law.
Once again, for those that are standing, there's plenty of seats here to my left, your right. We will now have our first musical selection, Rise by the Anacostia High School Choir.
Tired, living life on every story I was taught. For example, in darkness, twofold, standing over there, to meet them with no fear. This would be those around me cause, giving me complete control and power. Because of my speech impediment during my early years, I found physical violence was an answer to my tormenting words. I was glad that fast and strong, and changed the table quickly. The concept of the aggressive becoming the victim, and finally having the peace and silence from the governments in the very time. And this I found myself going around me, only to the pride and the ego, which is up has been gone. This is the other way around the problem that I faced and gave me a good positive solution. As a man, I found another way to beat darkness with darkness, to take a hold of that heart, every day into my life. But as I grow up living and understanding, I think the better words like life bearer, and be my brother's keeper, which is the framework for the clue on how I live myself and trying to do today. Today in reflection, darkness meets the ego of pride. As a Catholic gentleman, I'm called to be my brother's keeper, a life bearer for all these words. I understand that people that are present in those around me, and there's good in me that must be testing darkness. The good in me will receive those actions, deeds, and holiness, which I should never dare let go. Meeting darkness with light requires kindness, patience, forgiveness, and most of all, love. These virtues constitute the pillars of the true measure of the good man of transformation. My mind stays in the My name is Albert Curry, Jr. I'm the deputy of CG4, and this is my story. I was born in a segregated South, in Edgefield, South Carolina, in 1958. I am the great-grandson of Harriet and Lot Curry, both born in institutional slavery. I am the grandson of sharecroppers, Willie and Emma Curry. I am the son of Albert and Ruth Curry. Both education stopped at the 8th grade, but they made education the #1 priority for their kids. Early on, my home had no running water, and our restroom was an outhouse. At the age of 5, I picked cotton alongside my mother. My own cotton sack, made from a broker sack. During those early years, blacks had to enter through the rear of the establishments we served. Water fountains were labeled according to race. Yes, I entered through the rear of buildings. Yes, I drank from color-only water fountains. The school system I attended was segregated until I entered high school. High school, I entered Strong Thurman High School, where the mascot was the rebel. These are some of the challenges that I had to deal with early on. I had to synthesize the positive and the negative boundaries of the time. Let me pause and put a dash here in my life, because I don't think I have enough time to talk about what's in the dash. But I think my life journey embraces the principles and the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., overcoming obstacles and barriers and taking advantage of opportunities. So today I stand before you as Dave, Deputy Assistant Commandant of Engineering and Logistics of the United States Coast Guard. This is my story. Thank you.
Could we find someone who not only knows something about the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, but also someone who could inspire us to put into practice the principles that Dr. King stood for? Those principles are represented on the quotes that you see here today that are engraved at the memorial. Those are the questions that were facing the committee once we decided to try to bring the memorial here to Coast Guard headquarters. The answer to those questions is Mr. Darius Gordine. Mr. Bourdin is a prolific and very successful writer. You can find his work online. Specifically, if you go to Amazon, you'll find his series of books titled Jewels that track the history of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He's a man of passion, a man of faith, and he himself is a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. And that fraternity played a significant role in making the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial a reality here in D.C. So sit back and listen as he tells us some of the things that make that memorial significant, but more importantly, as he illuminates for us the principles that Dr. King stood for and how we must put those principles into practice every day of our lives. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bourdin.
Thank you so much. I flew up here from Charleston, South Carolina, where I live now. And we had some snow last week. And when you have snow in D.C., Maryland, Virginia, they have things called snow plows and snow trucks and salt. Well, where I live, we don't get snow but once every 15, 20 years. So when the snow comes down there, they have something called the sun. So I wish I was on here. But I'm happy to be here. Miss Adria was the one who actually called me. She was the one that spoke a few minutes ago. And she reached out to me and she said, she actually saw me before. I used to be in a group called Step Africa. And we traveled all around the world doing step shows and African dance. And we did a show in Ohio, and I guess she was in school there, and she saw me, this was years ago, before all these gray hairs came. And so she called me and said, hey, listen, I'm with the Coast Guard, I'm doing this MLK program, and we're looking for a keynote speaker, and we want somebody to come in that's familiar with the monument and also a brother of Alpha. And I said, cool, I can do that, that's no problem, I'd be honored. And I said, well, when is the event? Well, it's in January. I said, okay, I'll make my schedule available. And I said, how was the event set up? I said, well, this is how it's set up. I said, who spoke last year? She said, Congressman John Lewis. I said, John Lewis as in the guy who actually walked with King? She said, yeah, John Lewis spoke last year. Now, I said, well, what did he talk about? She said, well, he had pictures of him with King. He talked about the experience of marching with King. I said, well, I can Photoshop, so you sure you want me to go speak at this time? But this is an honor. This is an honor. I thank you, Admiral, for asking me to do this. And when she said she was looking for someone who was familiar with the monument, I told her that I was. And I am, because my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, is who had the actual idea, which is amazing because it was a couple of guys sitting around talking. And they said, you know, there's no reason we don't have a monument to Dr. King. So what would it take to make that happen? How do you get a monument in D.C.? Thank God for Google. Somebody figured that out. And they began to research what would it take to get that done. Now, this was in the 80s. It didn't actually go to legislation until 96. But in terms of the fraternity, we made a decision in 83 that we wanted to go about the business of building this monument. So in the mid-90s, I was living in New York, and I worked for the Tommy Hilfiger Corporation. I used to do security for Mr. Hilfiger. I know I'm not that big of a guy, but I did security, believe it or not. And so one day, it's a true story, one day we are in a limousine. It's me, Tommy, and another gentleman who's my fraternity brother. And at that time, Tommy had got some bad press for saying some disparaging things on Oprah Winfrey Show. Now, the amazing thing about that was Tommy had never been on the Oprah Show, never even met Oprah Winfrey. So he was like, how can I get this rumor to die? They keep saying I said these things and I never said them. I never even met Oprah Winfrey. So then I said, well, you know what you could do? My fraternity is trying to build a monument to Dr. King. Why don't you cut a check? I said, why don't you become a sponsor? He said, who do I call to do that? It sounds interesting. So I gave him the contact person. They got in contact. They began to talk. It was Harry Johnson at the time. He was over the monument. He became our general president for 4 years. And Tommy got in contact with the office, and Tommy cut a check for $5 million. Tommy's CEO was named Joel Horowitz. Joe said, I want to get a piece of that. I said, go right ahead. Got his check worked out. Joe cut a check for $5 million. Tommy Hilfiger USA, the actual company, said, we want to get a piece of that. So they cut a check for $5 million. So overall, Tommy gave $15 million. He was the first sponsor to come on. After he came on, the NBA came on, Delta Airlines came on, Coca-Cola came on, and they all became major sponsors. So, when she asked if I knew anything about the monument, I said yes. Because I gave $15 million. That's a true story. Not my part, but the other part. And when I spoke to the admiral, we had a conference call. He said, what we want to do is we want to bring the monument here. And I understand that because, you know, when you live in a city that has tourist attractions, a lot of times you don't get... I live in New York. New Yorkers don't go to the Statue of Liberty. It ain't going anywhere. They don't go. And so when you live in D.C., a lot of times you don't actually go to the Washington Monument. You don't go to the Jefferson Memorial. You live here. But, you know, tourists come, but you don't do that kind of stuff when you live here. And so I understand a lot of people might not have actually gone to the monument, so they wanted to bring it here, which I think is an excellent idea. For you guys who have never gone, you should. All these placards they have around the room are actually signs from the monument. These are bits of his speeches. Now the monument has these speeches up, but none of these speeches are the I Have a Dream speech, which is King's most famous speech. And the reason they designed it that way is because everyone knows that speech, and they figured, well, let's get some words that most folk aren't familiar with. So these are some of the words that you might not be as familiar with, which is a good talking point, right? But the way the monument was constructed, so fraternity gets together, and they say, we want to do this thing, and now money's coming in, so we had to get an architect. We put up bids to get an architect, got the architect in, and we gave them the concept or whatever, and they began to put it together. And the way that the monument was actually built was very strategic, okay? One of the most famous quotes from the I Have a Dream speech is, from the Mountain of Despair comes the Stone of Hope. So in the statue, you see he's like coming out of the stone almost. That's called the Stone of Hope. And if you was to stand behind him, you can kind of see in the picture here, there's two stones behind him. Those are the Mountain of Despair. So when you're looking from the back, it's almost like he's coming out of the Mountain of Despair into the Stone of Hope. That's what he was trying to get us to understand when he said that thing, when he lived his life. So when we designed the actual monument, there's a reason behind it. As you can see, his arms are folded, there's a scroll in his hand. In that scroll is the I Have a Dream speech. There's some water in front of him. There's a little pool-looking thing in front of him. That water represents all those who marched in civil rights with him, that sacrificed so much so we could all be seated here today. There are cherry blossoms that were donated by Japan as a sign of peace. The cherry blossoms, he's gazing at them, and according to National Geographic, they bloom every year around April 4th. April 4th was the day he was assassinated. So all of this with the monument was put together for a reason, and so I really would suggest you go down there. If you've never been, take a walk down there on a nice day. Not today, because it's kind of cold. In the next couple of weeks, take a walk down there, especially around April when the cherry blossoms come. It's a very pretty sight. You want to see it. But anyway, so fraternity gets together, they said, okay, we want to build this thing. And the general president at that time in '83 was named Ozell Sutton. I know you've heard of him before. Ozell Sutton. He was a great man. First African American to join the Marine Corps. He was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Obama last term. And so he recently passed away. But Brother Sutton was a monumental guy, so in '83 he was president when the idea came to him. And he said, great, let's do this. You know why? Because he marched with King. He was from Arkansas. He lived in Little Rock. So when all that was going down in the '60s, he was right in the middle of it. So he's very familiar with Dr. King. He knew him firsthand. And he was very excited about doing this project, right? So he now gets the legislation together to bring it to the White House. It has to be signed by the president. So him and his board, all alphas, go to the White House. They get to the White House, true story, they get to the White House, and the president at that time was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton walks in, sees the brothers sitting there, sees Ozell Sutton, and says, Ozell! What's up, man? What you doing here? That's a true story. You know why? Because Ozell Sutton worked with Bill Clinton in Arkansas. When Bill Clinton was on the board in Arkansas, he's from the Arkansas legislature, Ozell Sutton was one of his right-hand men. So when he walked in the door, Bill Clinton was like, that's Ozell. So he knew all about him, and when he presented the idea, Bill Clinton said, let's do it. So fast forward a couple of years, the monument is built, everybody's getting happy about it. We got to raise $110 million. Not an easy task. We're getting sponsors, brothers are donating, chapters are giving money in. We got fundraisers, I'm washing cars and whatnot. We're doing all this stuff to raise money to build this monument. So we finally get enough to at least break ground and get the process going. So this groundbreaking ceremony is like a big event. And so I went to the groundbreaking with a frat brother of mine and his son. His son was about 10 years old at the time. And we go down there, and when you got to, now, let me give you the climate of the groundbreaking. I walked in the groundbreaking, next to me, this is a true story. Next to me is Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Jamal Bryant. That's who I walked in with, okay? Now, when I got past the first gate, of course, they got a little further than I did. I don't know why. I'm telling you who they are. But they had a second gate that was limited access. And the only people allowed past the second gate were members of the media, if you had a credential, if you had a press pass, and members of the fraternity. Okay? So I get to the second gate. And I said to the guard, how do you get past this gate? He said, you remember the media? I said, no, I'm not. He said, you an alpha? I said, yeah. He said, show me your pass card. I pulled it out, I walked right in. And my frat brother was with his son. So his son says, Dad, how did Darius just get in? He said, because membership has its privileges. So we go in, right? I'm front row, I'm like right there. And on the stage, these are dignitaries honoring Dr. King at this groundbreaking. And there are 3 presidents there, George H. Bush, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. Like I said, Oprah Winfrey was there, the entire King family was there. Bernice spoke. Bernice is an AKA. And she said, yes, an AKA in the house. Founders Day is what, Monday? Founders Day is Monday. Happy Founders Day in advance. But Bernice said, now this is funny. Bernice said, there is not a fraternity who would be able to raise $110 million to my father other than Alpha Phi Alpha. And the reason that was funny was because Jesse Jackson was sitting next to her. Right? Jesse's an Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And he said, anyway. So I'm on the front row, and there's dignitaries that are on the thing. And John Lewis was there. John Lewis was on the thing. And they had the choir sang, and it was just a beautiful thing. And so they come down off the stage, and they all get shovels. You know how they do with the bow tie, the bowls? It's nice. And they did the shovel thing, and there was somebody from the NBA. I think Abdul-Jabbar was there, representing the NBA. It was an awesome event. And I saw Tommy Hilfiger. He had a shovel. And so they do the thing, and then I approached him and said, hey, Mr. Hilfiger, how you doing? Now, at that point, I was living in D.C. I already left the corporation. I wasn't working for him anymore. So I hadn't seen Tommy in about 5 or 6 years, maybe. And he was like, Darius, man, it's good to see you. You don't want to give me this idea for this event? And I was like, yes, sir, I was. You know, I gave $10 million to this event. But it's just an awesome thing to have just been that close to it, you know. And so I began to think about some of the things that Dr. King stood for, you know, and him being an alpha. And I was looking some stuff online before I got here. And the team that he had around him when he was doing what he did, most of them were alphas. If they weren't alphas, they were in some other fraternity, like John Lewis is a Sigma, Phi Beta Sigma fraternity incorporated, all right? Founders Day was yesterday? Yesterday, Founders Day yesterday? So John Lewis is a Sigma. Matter of fact, I put on Facebook that I was coming up here to speak, and I said, John Lewis was last year. One of your faculty said, yeah, I'm on the Sigma. So I'm printing them. But anyway, Dr. King surrounded himself with greatness. Dr. Wyatt T. Walker was one of his right-hand men. He was an alpha. Joseph Lowry was over the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He was an alpha. Marianne Barry is one of his top aides who became the mayor of DC. One of our greatest mayors. He's out. So he surrounded himself with this greatness. But I thought about, because the admiral asked me, well, how can you inspire us today? What can we take from this statue to live out our lives every single day? And so I said, okay, let me look at the theme of this thing. Let's bring the monument here. Now, if I said, everyone stand up and we're going to walk down to the monument and take a look at it. We're all going to walk. Is that possible to do from here? Sure it is. I mean, it's possible. I mean, if it was a nice day, you could do it. You wouldn't want to do it. You better take Uber or something like that, but you can do it. You can do it, right? I mean, you could do it. But what if I said, well, let's walk to the Allegheny Mountains of Pennsylvania from here. Let's walk that. How many would do that? Or let's walk to Lookout Mountain in Tennessee. Let's walk from here to Lookout Mountain in Tennessee. How many would do that? Or better yet, let's walk from here to the curvaceous slopes of California. Let's do that. Who's all game for that? My man. Security, let's go to the man. I went to the hospital. Most folks wouldn't sign up for that type of an adventure. But when I tell you that the gentleman that spoke earlier, when he said some of the things that he said, and when Adria said her dad drank from the wrong water fountain, when you think about what Dr. King was staring at when it came to social justice, it's just what we should have as a right, as being human. He was looking at walking from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, California. That's what he was looking at. As impossible, as probable as that, as crazy as that sounds, who would walk from Washington to LA? That's what he was looking at. And let me tell you, the easiest way to walk from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, California is by taking the first step. And then the second step. And then the third step. And before you know it, you're on your way. And by the time you get to the outskirts of D.C., you might have someone walking with you. By the time you get to West Virginia, you might have some other folk walking with you. And before you look up, you see a sign that says, California right ahead. As impossible as certain things might sound, if you just start, you'd be amazed what God has enabled you to do. Everything Dr. King did, everything he stood for, everything he died for, God placed inside of him. And the very same thing that God put in him, God put in me, God put in him, and God put in every single one of you. God does not say, well, you're special, I'm going to give you more than I give her. He gives all of us the same thing. So if Dr. King could change the world by taking the first step, and the second step, and the 18th step, and the 34th step, then you can too. And I can too. But it starts by looking at the impossible and calling it probable. No, it's not impossible to walk from DC to LA. No one wants to do it, but it's not impossible. So friends, I challenge you. Take the first step. Don't look at anything ever as impossible. Because Dr. King would back me up by saying this. With God, all things are possible. Thank you guys so much for listening to me. Thank you for watching my voice. Thank you so much.
At this time, we give a presentation of a special gift by Admiral Bashir.
Darius, I just want to start off by thanking you for your $15 million contribution. But when my staff came in and briefed me, they said, hey, we're bringing the monument here to Coast Guard headquarters. And I said, really? And Alan Anderson, the project officer, said, yes, we're going to bring the monument here to Coast Guard headquarters. And you know what? You've actually succeeded in doing that. Not only bringing the images of the monument, including these great inscribed words that are part of the monument, but more importantly, the spirit of the monument. And that's been amplified by our storytellers, by our choir here, really brought the spirit of Dr. King here into the room. And the United States Coast Guard has been an incredible beneficiary of this great gift that Dr. King has given us, which is an organization where you really can be judged by the content of your character, not the color of your skin, where everybody can contribute to the mission of the United States Coast Guard, which by and large is saving people's lives at sea, protecting our citizens, and all these great things. And that Dr. King opened up that opportunity for every single American who wants to be able to serve. So I've got a little book here, and it's inscribed by both the Commandant and myself. Commandant couldn't be here today, and he sends his regards. But this is a book on Coast Guard history. And if you read through this book, you'll see portions of it where the Coast Guard struggled with many of the same segregation issues and things that the rest of our society dealt with, and how we came through that. But you'll also see some lights in here that kind of shined as a beacon through Coast Guard history. So you'll read about the Pea Island Life Saving Station, which was completely manned by African Americans. Every single one of the members of that life saving station was awarded the Gold Life Saving Medal, which is our highest honor for heroism to rescue people at sea. You also read about Captain Hellebore and Mike Healy, who was the commanding officer of the Coast Guard cutter Bear up in the old territory of Alaska in the 1800s. If you're not aware, he was the son of a slave, the first person of African American descent to ever command a warship in the United States was commanded here in the United States Coast Guard. So we had a mixed history of dealing with the difficult issues that Dr. King did, but I can tell you, he really brought the monument here, Darius, to the United States Coast Guard headquarters. Not only the Stone of Hope and the images of the Stone of Hope and all the words inscribed in the Stone of Hope, but the spirit of Dr. King and this great gift that he bequeathed on the organization of the United States Coast Guard. So on behalf of the 40,000 men and women of my organization, thank you for sharing Martin Luther King's spirit with us today, Darius. Traditions, if I can pass along to you my personal challenge coin for those who go above and beyond the service of the United States Coast Guard. Thank you very much.
The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Good morning. My name is Mike Darius. I'm the head of contracting here for the U.S. Coast Guard. But almost 30 years ago, I was a two-time high school dropout and a homeless teenager, sleeping outside in the elements and eating my meals out of a 7-Eleven trash can. I grew up in an impoverished environment with a single mother, never met my father, and at the age of 15, my mother abandoned me. That's a long story. After she left me, by the grace of God, I was taken in off of the streets by an African American family. They didn't look at my race. They looked at a kid that needed a helping hand, and so they extended one. They took me in, cleaned me up, got me back into school, and later took legal guardianship of me. And I am certain that if it weren't for their unconditional love and support, I would not be standing here before you today. I love Mom and Pop dearly, and if they were here, I wanted them to be here. Unfortunately, they've got some health issues. They would have been standing right next to me. The experience growing up with them has made me a true ambassador for diversity and inclusion over the course of the last 30 years. And as it relates to this particular quote from the memorial, it makes me think back to a time when I was a host at a restaurant as a high school senior. And this was after Mom and Pop had taken me in. During the first week of on-the-job training, I started to notice a pattern. There was a verbal system in place between the servers and the hosts. And it wasn't too difficult to pick up on what that system was all about. So I went to the host that was training me, and I asked what this was all about. Hey, I'm hearing a certain verbal cue when certain folks come into the restaurant. What's that about? And he explained to me that the servers preferred for African American patrons to be seated in the least desirable tables, because according to him, and the least desirable tables were the ones closest to the noisy kitchen and the bathrooms. And so I said, well, why is that? He said, well, and this is according to him, the African American patrons don't tip as well. I was outraged. So I went home and I asked Mom and Pop, what should I do? What should I do about this? And they said, son, do what you believe is the right thing to do. And as fate would have it, on my last day of training, an African American couple comes in, and I'm about to take them into the dining room and seat them, and the server passes me and gives me the verbal cue. So I had a decision to make. And right then and there, I decided I was not going to seat them at the predetermined table that the server wanted me to put them at. I was going to give them their table of choice. And although I needed that job, I also made a conscious decision in that moment to quit. So I took my nameplate off, I handed it to the host that was training me, and I said, that couple that you just asked me to discriminate against could have very well been my parents. And I'm not going to work for a company that sponsors racism. And I walked out of his restaurant, leaving him dumbfounded. Now, I didn't have to do what I thought was the right thing in that moment, but I chose to, because what a person does when nobody is watching is more important than what a person does when everyone is watching. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Catherine Davis, and I'm a fiscal law attorney here at the Coast Guard. I was born in Hartsville, South Carolina, and raised by my grandparents, who had been sharecroppers. My grandparents, my mom and her siblings tell stories of them picking cotton and tobacco under the sweltering sun. This was a requirement for their family survival, and oftentimes it required that they miss school. Fortunately, though, the sharecropping had ended by the time I came along. Growing up, I would accompany my grandmother on her errands. We usually walked because we did not own a car and there was no public transportation. At each business we entered, the business owners and employees were usually white, and they would address my grandmother by her first name. And she would respond, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And I would sit there and think, why is she answering them like that? Because clearly they're younger than she is. Gradually I came to realize that she did this because they were white. And this is something that she had become accustomed to, and it was expected of her. In my heart, I knew it was wrong, but I knew I couldn't say anything, because then I would be disrespectful to her. I was a beneficiary of the Head Start program, which allowed me to attend school at the age of 3 for free. Following Head Start, I attended one of the 2 black-only elementary schools in my town. We had no white students. The white school was on the other side of town. However, we did have some white teachers along with our black teachers. As I was about to enter junior high, the city made a decision to merge the black and white high schools. This was 1982, 2 28 years after Brown versus the Board of Education, 23 years after Dr. King's speech at the Youth March for Integrated Schools. They arranged classes based on the results of standardized tests. So I went from being the top student in my all-black elementary school to being the only black student in most of my classes. Surprisingly, I adjusted well, but my grandmother would have had it no other way, because from the moment I entered Head Start, she stressed the importance of education to me. But more surprisingly, the integration of the schools was successful. And it only recently dawned on me that my class, my junior high school class in 1982, was the first integrated class in Hartsville, South Carolina. In Dr. King's speech at the Youth March for Integrated Schools, he said, "Make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a better person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in." My grandmother's daily speech wasn't as eloquent, but again, she stressed to me the importance of education, equality, and service to your country. And she showed me this every day through the way she lived. I accepted the challenge and responsibility to be a champion of education, equality, and service. I'm the first in my immediate family to graduate from college, and I graduated with a bachelor's from Georgetown University, followed by my law degree from George Washington University National Law Center. I've also obtained a master of management in Army operations and national security. I've also committed myself to service to my country. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves, having served 7 years of active duty and 14 years as a reservist. I've been a federal civilian for 16 years. 10 of those years has been with the Coast Guard, where I have attained GS-15 status. As I stand here today, I realize that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. That includes my sharecropper grandparents and Dr. King. Thank you.
What an amazing event. I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. Before we close, I have a few other announcements to make regarding Dr. King's birthday and how we're going to carry it forward. This Friday, Coast Guard Headquarters will be conducting a community service project at MLK Elementary in the Anacostia neighborhood. On Monday, Coast Guard Headquarters will also be participating in the 12th annual MLK Parade. Request that you and your families please come out and join us, as well as we march. We're going to have the Honor Guard as well as a small boat from Station Washington. They will be following us in the parade. Also, you attend. And at that time, we'll also be handing out Coast Guard mementos. If you wish to, going back to the service project, if you wish to participate, is Petty Officer Lesko still here? If not, send them an email if you wish to participate in the service project on Friday. There's only a few slots available. As we conclude the program, I request you please stand as the Anacostia High School Choir performs Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known as the National Negro Anthem. Once again, as they conclude, we also invite you to stop by the answer room to view the artifacts that are on display. Ladies and gentlemen, Anacostia High School Choir.
And thank you guys so much for inviting us. If you know the lyrics or if you see them up above, please feel free to sing along.